Thanks for coming. Today's topic is AI solutions for online asynchronous courses. And me and my colleague Kristin will be host this session. Uh, Kristin, you want to introduce yourself?
So my name, excuse me, my name is Kristin Hall. I'm a senior instructional designer in CELT. I'm also adjunct faculty in the HEA Higher Education Administration program, where I do teach online asynchronous courses.
She'll share her teaching experience, examples in her teaching to us. So my name is Jenny, and I am a senior instructional designer at CELT too. So today our goal is to explore the potential risks and concerns surrounding AI and academic integrity in online asynchronous courses. I think that online asynchronous courses brings you here for this. And also we would identify strategies to mitigate these AI-driven academic integrity challenges and discover solutions to enhance engagement, personalize learning, and maintain academic standards. So this I'm just skipping over because by then most people already know what is the major AI tools. In our school, we have protected version of Copilot, which would keep, which is very secure one. So it won't send all the information you entered into the cloud. It would remain with us, and it would after each session, it just kind of forget about that. So that's a safe one. And of course, the most majority one is the ChatGPT. So far, the latest version is 4.0. And then the runner-ups are Google Gemini and the Claude. They all very good, but they both all of them have paid version and the free version. And there are some specialized tools for different function. For example, for image generation, there's 3 of them, but there's more because every day there's new apps popping out. And sometimes they came as components in your day-to-day software, like it came with Canva. And even now, even Zoom has a AI components already. So if you don't have to seek them, they come to you, all these AI things. So it's like, how can I keep up with all these AI stuff? You don't have to, they come to you. They would invade your field every day. So good and bad. So, and there's some of them are like text to voice, voice to text, and text to music. You can generate a song and create hip hop using I have a dream text, and also text to video. I'm not gonna play it, but right now I picked the two my favorite ones, and they all did a good job. So if you want to generate some tutorial video or instructional video for your class, you probably give it a try. All of them free. And no, I'm not gonna play it. Where's next one? Next slides. Sorry. Okay, so the next slide. How can I go to the next slide? Okay, good. Yeah, I just skipped one. That the other one is for 3D and apps. And if you don't want to pay and you want to have more open source, more ethical AI, there are some of the choice because I know at School of Medicine here, you cannot, you don't have access to this Stony Brook version, the protected version of Copilot. And also there's some difficulty to upload stuff to even to the free version of ChatGPT using the School of Medicine computer. So you can give this a try, like the Hugging Chat Assistance and the others. You can run a copy of ChatGPT, no, AI bots in your computer locally, and you feed the information. All this information keep private and won't go anywhere because it's a local copy in your computer. And also there is free access to ChatGPT chatbot arena that give you access to all the latest version of the paid version because they want to research which one is the best. That's why they call it arena. But this give you the opportunity to use them. And if you are very concerned about the privacy issue, um, the paid version, ChatGPT and Gemini everything, they do have a setting which allow you to opt out the sending to the cloud part. So, but you have to know where to find it and you have to manually turn this on. For the free version, unfortunately, you don't have this choice. But here, the Hugging Chat assistants, they they won't keep your information. So that's why I call it more open source and ethical AI. Okay, so the current research on AI education, there's very increased, in many cases, students have reported have better academic performance with AI integration, and the student have a positive understanding of AI role. And also students are confident about the potential, but that's a mixed, there's mixed results like privacy concern and also need for teacher training and also the AI bias. So these are all good, very good considerations we have to take into in our teaching, and we have to be aware of it before we actually fall on with this AI chatbot. So what AI can do in online asynchronous education? Online asynchronous courses, we don't have we don't have much real-time interaction. So this is really limits the engagement and get feedback instantly. So we actually want to introduce ways to introduce using AI to help bridge the gaps. So like automated tutors and instant feedbacks. So these could be integrated. But as I said, before you use it, you have to consider all these ethical and privacy issues. So now I'm going to create a poll. Let's see. Can you see it on the screen? No? Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, what brings you here? What's your concern? How comfortable you are with this generative AI in your course?
Do we write it in the chat or?
Oh, okay, sorry. I should have okay, here. Can you see it on the
Oh, okay. Now we see
yeah,
the.
yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not there.
Thanks. Okay, so let me share the screen, the results. So looks like, yeah, most of us, we are familiar with it, and some of them very knowledgeable. And also the biggest concern, academic integrity, and also, yeah, lack of control and reducing of student motivation. Oh, great, there is no major concerns, and yeah, so that's why we want to address the biggest concern, academic integrity. Student would academic integrity is an issue across all different formats of teaching, not only online asynchronous. So we want to introduce a way to proactively address it instead of just ban it, stop it, and trying to chase after all these issues. So that's why the first thing we want to do is including an AI statement in your course syllabus and then reveal this with your students, like openly talk to your students about that. based on our previous two student panel discussion on AI, something they talked about is they want some clear statement from the professor, like what is allowed in this course, what is not allowed. So otherwise they would be, oh, should I use it or should I not to use it? So this gives them unnecessary burden of trying to put their hands on the new tools. So that's why it's always advised to have a AI statement. So if you don't have one yet, you should start to consider that. Right now, it's almost it's already in the middle of the semester, but you can do this before the next semester begins, and it should give some clear, unambiguous way, because if you don't want to see students just misuse it, you have to tell them what is misuse, what is proper way to use it, and also have your TAs on the same page. So when they are doing grading or advising, they can tell student what is your requirements, what is the policy for your course. And also, it is important to know that AI is definitely going to be here, and the student will be using it after they graduate and go to workforce. So it is we actually want to prepare them for this instead of just stop them using it at all. You just have to guide them what's the best way to use it. So that AI detector thing, we actually got quite a few faculty come to us and asking about is there any AI detector, because they are troubled with this likely a ChatGPT generated text. Even in discussion, students submit very similar work. So is there any way to stop it, or to detect it, or to report them? So but we don't advise you to use the AI detector solely, because there's many issues, it's problematic, it's ineffective. It has many, first of all, this is not a very solid evidence, because what's the language they are using is likely AI written. Unlike plagiarism, there is no original text to be compared with. So you cannot say exactly, okay, this definitely AI written. It's no such thing as definitely AI written. It's itself, unless it's likely. So you cannot claim or report your student as likely. So that's not a very good evidence. And also, false positive rate is 4%. So that means you are gonna flag a lot of innocent students. Yeah. And also bias issue. It discriminates non-native speakers more than native speakers. And also in some of the extreme cases like this TOEFL test, we all know this is proctored, but still AI flagged this as like 97.8% say this is AI generated, which is totally not true. And also, yeah, so this serious bias issue. So that's why we want to create AI-aware assessment strategies for you. Let me just stop sharing.
Okay, can everybody see my screen? You good? Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some AI-aware assessment strategies and what I did in my class this past semester. I taught an asynchronous online course in student development theory. And it's it was relying a lot on written papers and also discussion boards. And so I had to really think creatively about how I could address different types of assessments to meet those learning objectives without solely relying just on research papers. So in addressing some concerns, we really want to think about reevaluating our assessments. So what are other ways that students can demonstrate that they have met those learning objectives? So what else can we do with students besides the kind of traditional, maybe just an exam or writing a paper? One thing that I really did with my assessments that you'll see in a few minutes is I discussed with my students why I was having them do something. And I think that really helped. Instead of just kind of giving them this assessment, what is the goal behind this and why am I doing it? As Jenny had said, you want to discuss your expectations with using AI in class. So I did have an AI policy on my syllabus. So we did use AI in my class, but I did have a policy that strictly stated that you could not just copy and paste from AI and use it at your own work. One of the things we also want to look at is focusing on process instead of the end product. So what can we do in building steps within submitting an assignment or and you'll see this in the assignments that I gave them, and really looking at that process rather than what is the finished product that they're going to hand it in. And especially for asynchronous online classes, providing very detailed and comprehensive instructions. Nothing should be ambiguous. You want to make sure to be extremely clear in your expectations and what they need to do for their assessments. So here are some examples. We want to look at assessments that require problem solving, some creative thought, critical thinking, and thinking about applying stuff to real world tasks. This is where case studies or scenarios, application types of questions can be helpful. You also may want to consider alternative methods, such as ones I have here. Can they create a conference poster or an infographic or concept map? And that's one of the things I did in my class. They had to create a concept map. Can they do a podcast, storyboarding, any sort of alternative method in order to demonstrate that they've met those learning objectives? And you want to see about creating opportunities for students to use AI in their work. So teaching them how to use it responsibly, because it can be helpful without just giving a direction to do something completely for you. So here are some examples. So what are some ideas, some brainstorming ideas if you're having some writer's block? Can it help with, improving grammar, writing structure? As Jenny had shown, helping with generating ideas for graphics and brainstorming. I use it a lot for brainstorming ideas. So this, I think, is probably one of the most challenging as we're looking into asynchronous online courses, is discussion forums. I know when we first heard about ChatGPT, I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do with discussion forums? Like, what is going to stop a student from just taking that prompt and putting it into the AI and then generating their response? So we really have to be very, very careful about the prompts and what we're using. So we want to use open-ended questions that require application and also incorporating some sort of personal reflection. So how does this apply to your life? How can it apply to a career setting that you're going to be in? Do you have an example of something where this happened to you in your relevant experiences? Also scenarios. So giving a scenario and kind of what would you do in this situation based on the content that you've gone over in class. I really like this one too, is future predictions. It's kind of like, what do you think could happen based on what you've learned? Is there any way that you could have any sort of kind of predictions going forward? I use this a lot, is the surprised challenged kind of questions. So as you're reflecting on a specific topic, it's like, is there anything at the content that surprised you or challenged you, as you're, reviewing the content? And then also, if you can help them with prompts that help them to connect from different disciplines or from another course that they're taking. So how does what you're learning relate to something that you're learning in another class that you're currently in? You can also help with responses. So can we have alternative responses besides just the written response? Can there be video or audio responses, concept maps, social media posts, digital stories? Is there other things that we can do than this traditional, like, here's your prompt, and then you're just writing that response down? I also wanted to call out this resource here, the Florida Gulf Coast University Digital Learning Blog. They had really good examples as well for other prompts and ways to have students respond to these prompts. So I recommend to check that resource out. And so this is some of the examples I'm going to go through of what I did in my class. So this one here is an application challenge surprised question. And I also threw in some student choice as well. I feel like that is really helpful to give students maybe a choice over what they can answer. So here you can see I have 3 different choices. And the first one, based on the theories models you reviewed, what can student affairs educators do to make your campus more welcoming for students who want to explore their racial, ethnic, sexual, and/or gender identities? So it's kind of getting them to apply what they've learned in those theories to a current setting that they're already in, or something that could, that they would be going into later. The second one, I have the surprise challenge. So is there anything that surprised you or challenged your perspective on social identity development? How does this influence you as a higher education? So again, that is another application question, getting them to really think about, what did surprise, what did challenge them? And that's something that I feel like, could they put that into AI? I guess they could, but I feel like it would be a bit weird. I feel like the responses would come out a little bit stranger for that. And then the last one that you have here again, that oh, I have 1, 1, 2. It's supposed to be 3 choices. Like the bullets are wrong there, but how do identities such as race, ethnicity, or social class intersect with students' gender or sexual identity? So it's again asking them to kind of compare these things, and how might this affect the way students interact with each other and/or student affairs professionals. So again, trying to get them to this application kind of question. So here's another example of a discussion forum that I did for personal reflection. So the first one you can see is, as you reflect upon the various paradigmic perspectives presented in the text, inclusive positivism, post-positivism, constructivism, and critical and cultural paradigms, consider which of these perspectives resonates most deeply with you. So this is really getting them to kind of look at the different perspectives, and then they really have to reflect on which one they gravitate towards. And this is kind of focusing on your beliefs towards research, and do you think things are true, or is there, subjective experience kind of involved? So this was another example of that personal reflection. This is one where I experimented using AI in the discussion forum. So instead of trying to fight against, are they going to use AI? I just said, nope, we're going to use it. We're going to figure out how this works. So this was a little bit more involved, but I had them choose a prompt, which I did provide several prompts, and then they could also create their own prompt. So they had to take that prompt, they had to put it into either ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot. I chose those two because ChatGPT is one of the most popular, and Microsoft Copilot is through Stony, Brook, so they could just sign in with their NetID and password if they didn't want to create an account with ChatGPT. So they had to put that prompt in, they had to see what the AI generated for them, and then they had to copy and paste that into the discussion board. Then they had to reflect on that AI generated answer. So then I wanted them to look at, what is the accuracy? Is it accurate what generative AI provided? And is there anything that they would change, add, or delete to that response to make it more comprehensive based on what they've learned from their text? So I actually found this was really a pretty good exercise for students. Some I don't think went too much into the critique as they got the generative AI response. They're like, yeah, it looks good. But I kind of probed them a little bit more. I'm like, is it, it was a bit general, like it gave information, but it could have went a little bit further. So then we were able to kind of have that discussion in the discussion boards about kind of pushing it and seeing how it was very overall. It was accurate, but it was overall pretty general. And I got some pretty good discussion through there. For some of my students, I do teach in a graduate higher education program. It was the first time they used AI, which I was shocked. They were all scared of it. So, but I feel like having them use it responsibly, teaching them how to use it was better. So this was really good. I actually also followed up with another. So that was 1 week for AI discussion. And then the next week, it actually aligned perfectly. We were talking kind of about ethical and moral development. And I had them also reflect on the process of using AI and what is the ethical, moral responsibility for students and for faculty. So that was also another follow-up discussion that I did with them. As far as assignments, I introduced using a concept map for this semester. I do have to admit students were a little hesitant and some of them had no idea where to start. So I feel like if I were to do this again, that I would provide more direct instruction about how to do a concept map, because some of them were, as much as I had a whole folder in Brightspace and there was all resources in there, they were still a bit lost because they didn't have to go to those resources. So I would build that more into the weekly schedule. But they did a concept map throughout the entire semester. So each, I would say about every 3 weeks or so, they had to submit a draft of their concept map based on what they had learned. So I really talked about the reasons about why I did this, that it had a lot to do with something called dual coding, about using imagery and words together. It would help them to create a mental model of everything. And because we were learning a little bit about a lot of stuff, it would help them to kind of organize that information a little bit better. So they had 3 drafts throughout the entire semester. So as they would have their draft and then they would learn more, they'd build upon that draft, and they kind of kept going until they got to the last where they had to submit their final concept map. Now, if they did this as they were going through the semester, their final concept map was pretty much done after the 3rd draft. Just maybe a few things they had to tweak based on my feedback. But as they kind of got the hang of it throughout the whole semester, I had some really strong concept map examples. So I'll show you some examples. So this one here is on racial identity development models, and this a student did, and I was so impressed. So based on the kind of the main concepts, they had to look at like stages or developmental stages within each theory, and they had to organize this by certain areas. So this is just one picture. The student's map was much bigger, but this is just one section of what they did for racial identity development. And this is another example. So again, this is one piece of their concept map. It was much larger. We used Miro as a software tool in order to create these concept maps. And I was just very impressed by being able to succinctly, they had to be able to digest the information and to really make it concise in order to be able to put it into these maps and to really hone in on what was the important information they need to know for each area. So this was just another example of that. So they did a really, really good job. And right now, AI is not that great at creating concept maps. Doesn't mean that will change, but right now, it's not that great. So this is, maybe it could kind of help them get started, but it may give very inaccurate information and being able to organize that information. So I felt that this was a really helpful assignment for students. And I did get feedback from a few students at the end of the semester that at first they were like, what is this? I don't like this. And at the end, they were like, this was the most valuable assignment I did in the entire class. So another example of what I had students do is a case study analysis, and I had them do this in small groups. So they were either in groups of 2 or 3, where they were case studies at the end of our textbook, and there were about 7 of them. And so again, to have that student choice, they were able to pick any one of those case studies they wanted. And then I think each case study had about 8 or 9 questions. And then I think they had to choose, it was either 4 or 5 of those questions to answer. So again, having the student choice, having that kind of onerous over the assignment, but having to work together and then kind of analyzing a case study based on what they learned in the class. So you can see here, this is what I had more detailed instructions for the assignment. So they had to choose 4 questions to answer. And as part of that group collaboration as well, I always build into my group assignments that I tried to make them not a high stakes assessment. So this was just kind of one assignment that was, practice being able to work together, being able to, interact with another student. So I got that student-student interaction, but it was in a lower stakes kind of environment. So not a whole lot of their grade was based on it. And they had to then reflect on each other's progress. So that was a kind of a separate thing that they would submit along with their project, is that they would then reflect on, how they worked in the group and how their group members worked in the group. So I could get a little bit more kind of insight on if someone kind of did all the work or not. But I do find that these group assignments work really well when it's not a super high stakes assessment. And then I like to include knowledge checks into my class. I find that they're really helpful, especially it emphasizes retrieval practice, which is one of the best forms of learning, is that active retrieving of information. So, but it's kind of hard because if online asynchronous, all of my knowledge checks, they're just short quizzes. They are not timed, and I assume it's open book. But how do I just stop students from putting the question into AI and they getting the answer? So it can be very challenging. So what I like to focus on a lot is application questions. And I really work with the 4 answer choices to make sure that it's not completely obvious what the wrong answer is, which can be very, very hard. I have to admit, I actually use ChatGPT to help me with these a bit. Sometimes they had ChatGPT, I feel like, has good days and bad days. And so sometimes I had to really change my prompts to really kind of get good answers. And sometimes I just wouldn't. I would just give up and try again the next day. But here's just an example of an application question that they had to do. So university is reviewing its campus facilities and services to ensure they're inclusive and accessible to all students. During the review, it becomes apparent that many of the older buildings on campus are not fully accessible for students with physical disabilities. This situation exemplifies which concept? So it's also pretty, it's longer. So you have to kind of read the question, you have to read the answers and digest that information without it being just a kind of a simple, like, okay, here's the right answer. Really thinking about what they've learned and then how does that apply? And here is another one. In the application of student development theories, practitioners must exercise several cautions to avoid common pitfalls. Based on the outlined cautions in the text, which scenario best demonstrates a thoughtful and critical use of these theories? So again, it's not like super easy, in order to kind of like look at that answer. So those are the examples that I had for what I did in my class. It's not exhaustive. So there's many, many other things that you can try to do for your class, but I hope that these kind of examples can help with some brainstorming on what you can do with your classes. Does anybody have any questions?
Or anyone want to share your example?
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. So was there anybody in your class that had no experience with AI? And so when you offered the 2, they had to reach out to you because they were either fearful or just didn't have what they felt they needed?
Yeah, I would say most of the students in my class had not used AI, and they expressed, because I actually, as part of the first discussion board, I actually had them reflect on their experience using the AI as well for this exercise. And a lot of them stated that they were fearful and they had never used it before, and they could see how powerful it was in helping, but they could also see that it was limiting because it gave an answer which was kind of correct, but it was very general. So that's what I was kind of hoping to show them, was that, here's a good tool, but you have to be careful because you still need to know and like understand the basic theories, and read the text and read the theories. But you can't just rely on generative AI to give that all to you, but you have to have a prior knowledge and base knowledge to then be able to reflect on that to see if it is accurate or not. Because if we can't miss that part of it. And so I think the experience, they liked it. They expressed that how it seemed to be helpful, but some of them are like, I'm not going to use it. So it was interesting, but I was kind of surprised that most of them had not used it at all. I think that's rare.
Yes, very
Yeah,
real.
I know. I'm so torn because part of me thinks I should just like do a little video of myself explaining to them like 2 minutes of here's where you can go, here's how you can do it. And then the other part of me thinks that I'm, pointing the wolf toward the hen house.
Yes, I completely agree. I was hesitant at first as well. but I felt like I had to push myself as an instructor in how to incorporate it, and then also figuring out other ways for assessment. They still had to write a paper. That was part of the class. They had to write a research paper. But I didn't want everything to be solely based on that. But in my opinion, AI is not going anywhere. It's just going to keep getting better. So how do we work with it rather than working against it? And I still feel like there's so much more to learn, especially within the asynchronous, because everything has always been so text-based. Either you're reading or you're writing. And I would say since COVID, things have definitely changed where there's more options and opportunities to do other things. But there's still a large reading and writing text-based component to it. So yeah, how do we work with AI instead of against it?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Very helpful.
Good. Any other questions or anyone want to share what they have done in their classes? Or concerns that you still have?
I can share Stony Brook University faculty example. I put on the chat how Dr. Sam Sharma, how he break down his research assignment into 20 steps, and each steps using AI, and yeah, use the feedback to leverage AI's power without totally let AI take over. So this could be classroom setting, could be online asynchronous setting. If you give very detailed instruction and ask students to follow up, and they would, and they can learn things from it instead of just copy and paste. Yeah, so I got the permission to share. Yeah, so we can also look at the resources slide.
Go back.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we have CELT has a AI series video, so you can take a look. If you haven't took our previous AI workshops, we have 3 of them. You can look at the previous one. But of course, every time we have to update it with new information because AI is developing too fast. And also we have a LibGuide for AI writing, and also a huge classroom syllabi policy for generative AI. This is a cloud sourcing document with I don't know how many hundreds of pages out there. So you have to run a search and find the subject matter you are teaching. And also there's also AI faculty development workshops from Stony. And yeah, and if you have concerns about what is cheating, what is okay, there is there actually is a flow chart, so it guides you through to see what is the proper use for AI and what is not. And yeah, so there's others out there like student handout you can give to students to let them understand the current, because we cannot assume student know everything. Just like Kristin's case, right? We would assume student know better than us, but probably not. So it's better to have some kind of handout to give them a little bit AI literacy.
And I had, so my class was graduate students, but I had a mix. Like I had some students who just graduated undergrad. And then I had some older students as well. So it was a mix of them. And even the students who had just graduated undergrad still had not used it before.
Yeah. Okay, great. So we have feedback survey.
Any other questions? So if you can do our short feedback survey, that would be helpful. We like to get our feedback so that we can help improve our workshops moving forward. And if you don't have any other questions, we'll stick around for a little bit after if you wanted to discuss anything.
Yes, the recording will be sent out. And I already shared the slides with you, so you can everything's linked up. So feel free to explore. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so now we can wrap up. Okay, let me stop recording.